Welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I'm joined by Zach Blostein, Chris Nee. The season, fellas, is mercifully over, and that means it's now the offseason with a fair amount of uncertainty facing us ahead as we cover what Florida State's next steps are under, I guess, will be the revamp to the revamp of the Mike Norvell regime. Florida State finishes the year at 5-7 with a 42-21 loss to Florida. You at least didn't get doubled up, right? I think that is the.
Well, you just doubled them up. I believe you said 42-21. It was 40-21.
What did I say?
I thought you said 42.
42-21. 40.
Yeah, I didn't feel that pause.
What about the pause that LaWayne McCoy gave me when I asked him about optimism? That felt like an eternity.
It was all about how you responded to it.
I did respond well. I give myself a pat on the back. Before we get into what will be a podcast that briefly breaks down the Florida game and really just the embarrassment that was that, but then what happens from here, what we know, what we don't know, what we're continuing to try to piece together. A shout out to our sponsors, the Turner Group. Poor Colin Turner is miserable right now. So support him, make Colin happier, buy a house for Christmas. What better gift to give your spouse than just, Colin will help you get it done quickly, quietly, and surprise them with a brand new house. I think that's a really fair thing to assume. Seriously, if you are looking to buy or sell, get on the market, Colin can help you out. The Turner Group, great people, work efficiently, highly recommended. Please let me know if you're trying to reach out to Colin. We can help facilitate as much. What you're going to need a lot of, and what you've had to probably use a lot of, and continue to, is Chattanooga whiskey. They are crushing it in the craft distillery game. Amazing job with their entry-level bourbon. I think I saw that they're now selling it in 1 liter bottles. You're probably going to need that. Get a little bang for your buck. But then their 111 proof, I think, is a gold standard for a budget-friendly, high-proof bourbon. It's exquisite at the price point. You can check out all their other cool, different limited edition type of stuff. Their Founders that comes out annually. I've seen that in Tallahassee recently at a big box store. Sorry, not Collins. Sorry, Chattanooga whiskey. Their Bottled and Bond is exquisite as well. They do a lot of great stuff, so check them out, please. All right, guys, 42-21. Better, Chris? All right,
Much
nailed
better.
it. Let's see. FSU surrendered how many rushing yards? I'm pulling that up here.
281, including 272, including 266 to Jadan Baugh.
Second most all-time for UF running back.
38 rushes by Baugh, not a single for a negative. That just kind of sums it up. FSU got way out physical in the trenches and was very poor at the second and third levels defensively. Jadan Baugh did what he wanted. He controlled the game. He allowed Legway to be efficient, going 15 of 24 for $168. 3 short touchdown passes in there. Did throw to 1 pick that bounced up and Edwin Joseph came away with. But yeah, Florida sort of, I think they scored on all but 3 series that they had in the game, if I recall correctly. Yeah, it was a pitiful performance.
It was embarrassing. And for the record, the record of most rushing yards in a game by a Florida running back came from one Emmitt Smith. Maybe you've heard of him. It was against New Mexico. You are in the ballpark of New Mexico, and in New Mexico in the late 1980s as well, which probably even worse than they are now. So,
yeah, and this is like one of the worst Florida teams in like recent memory. I mean, they're legitimate. They were 3-8 going into the game. They didn't have a head coach. Their interim head coach was a wide receivers coach
who was limitless over 4 weeks of coaching them prior to this one.
Yeah, they got blown out by Kentucky. They got blown out by Tennessee at home.
Kentucky just fired their coach.
Yeah, for getting blown out by Louisville. So, it's just a pitiful, like Chris said, performance, embarrassing. I mean, their game plan was so simple. It was hand the ball off to Jadan Baugh, and we're going to out-physical you, and Florida State could do nothing to stop that.
Florida had 9 chunk runs. All 9 came from Baugh, which isn't shocking. He had 38 of their 45 carries because they actually pick it back and stick with it.
You're saying that you're not allowed to just play Sam Singleton after
he may have gotten dinged up a little bit, to be fair.
Yeah, I did.
But they don't get the benefit of the doubt also based on
FSU had 37 rushes, 19 of which came from Tommy Castellano. So just over 50% came from your quarterback. Obviously, In college, some of that may include sacks. Your other 18 were divided between, I believe it's 8 different people, with Chroma getting 5, being the leading in the carries department. And in the rushing department, he also led with 27. The longest rush of the game did come from Singleton, a 21-yard scamper. Singleton ended up credited with just 2 carries in that game.
The level of frustration I'm trying to be professional. I do feel a level of wanting to be sarcastic in talking about this because this is ultimately, if I could take a step back, deep breath, what we're covering is not normal. And that's been the point that we've been making for more than a month now, is that this is, forget whether acceptable, unacceptable, they're accepting it, right? This has been, the administration has told us this is acceptable for the immediate future. This is not normal, though. And I shrug my shoulders at where you go from here. And it's not just this game, right? Like, they could have won the game, and my feeling wouldn't have been totally that much different. So I'm not banking on just where my emotional output is after watching them just get run all over.
I walked in there expecting them to lose. I expected them to lose in a lower scoring game, though. My disappointment is just like with the rushing thing. I find it, to use a simple word, I find it stupid. Like I very much I have asked Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn repeatedly, multiple times throughout the season, at different points within the season, about the rotation at running back, and the answer is always leaving me wanting more, and I never get more when I ask it in different forms, different fashions. And
ask the hard questions, Chris.
And I understand that there's some gimmicky, for lack of a better term, rushing attempts within the offense with stuff they do. So that's why a guy like Squirrel White has a couple carries. Guy like Jalen Lucas is used in that way. But FSU has no interest in actually establishing a true rushing attack this year in this system in any which way. And maybe it's because they don't believe they can with the O-line, or they don't believe they have a singular back who can do that. That's all well and good. The mass rotation, the obsession with rotation, the wasting carries on Roydell Williams, it blows my mind. I do not understand it. I don't get it. I don't like it. It irritates the living hell out of me.
What? So that you exited that game feeling more irritated by that than watching Baugh run for 260 yards over a run defense that's supposed to be the strength of what you do? That bothered me.
Around the time Jerry Wilson decided he didn't really want to try to tackle, it kind of defines what the defense is, and we've known that. The defense comes and goes with physicality. We opened the year with the defense having one of the more physical games I've seen by an FSU defense in several years, at least since probably the ACC championship. And we exit the year with them playing patty cake and being scared of contact and getting shoved and getting pushed and allowing every single run to pretty much finish forward and not making a single big play in a short yardage situation, it seemed like, at any time. So, like, I wasn't surprised by that. I'm not as irritated by that. I've come to accept it. I've struggled to accept the running game situation, the concept of the running game situation, especially with an offensive-minded coordinator who is a run-centric person. Like,
I don't. Yeah, it's nonsensical. I don't think Gus Malzahn. I think it's less likely than not. I think it's unlikely that he is calling plays next year for Florida State. So it's done. Like, in my mind, you're moving on from that aspect of this.
The only thing I came away from the game pleased with was Leroy McCoy played his backside off, and like Deuce did too, and Danzy made his opportunities when he had the opportunities.
Like, the McCoy stuff all comes when they're playing soft. I just like it was still an impressive catch. Everything he did was impressive, but it's like, how many hollow, empty stats have they put up this year? Like the Miami game. How many Robinson's receiving yards come when you're up or when you're trailing by multiple scores? I'm done with that experiment on offense, to be totally honest. I'm done with it. I wasn't a big fan of it going into the year. I was willing to have my mind changed after the first few games of the season, but it was what we thought it was. And we'll get into staff changes and what we think that a little bit. But like, I don't, that's just the exercise to me, Chris. It's like we're turning the page on that. It's more like culturally that you allowed a team to do that to you and you're running it back again. Like the reporting that we had going into the Florida game was that there were there were defenders who were wondering how bought in everyone was in that roster. I know we've heard that early in the year, and the guys buckled down and fought. They did not fight. It was the first game where I thought, oh, they just don't care to be here for an entire game.
You went 2-7 in their last 9 games. They didn't fight a whole lot throughout the back half of that schedule. Like, they beat a team that can't throw a forward pass in Virginia Tech. That's one of the 2 wins in those 9 games. Like, I have been removed for a while from believing that the thing was suddenly going to buck up and get it done. The only reason I had any optimism in the back half of that season that they might beat some teams is because I thought the offense might have one of those days where they hit big plays and score enough points to exceed the total they allowed to the other team. The issue that became prevalent there was anytime they touched the road, suddenly the offense sort of went to sleep and was non-existent. And that happened, at Stanford, at Clemson, to some degree, even at Florida.
They had a shitty schedule in the back half of the year too, and they didn't capitalize on it. They beat Wake at home and they beat Virginia Tech at home, and neither of those had quarterbacks that could throw a forward pass. I don't understand what we're doing, and it is frustrating. And I guess that can bring us to the changes that we expect them to make to the front office. Let's get into some of the reporting. And Zach, I'll let you take the lead on that, and I'm going to have thoughts and analysis on that, but I want to provide the news part of it real quick.
Yeah, well, as we've known since they made the announcement that they're keeping Mike, and looking into wholesale changes to the football program, those changes that were referred to by the administration and specifically Peter Collins are pertaining to the front office specifically. And since then we've heard that Bruce Warwick, who's the senior associate AD for football, held a meeting last week with all of the front office, off-field support staffers, basically saying that changes are coming. He didn't, specify when or to what extent, but the messaging I heard was basically, this is what comes with losing. Someone's has to fall on the sword in a sense, and it seems like from everything we've heard, FSU's main focus will be on completely restructuring the front office, and that starts with the general manager position. I don't know the extent to what that role is going to look like, but some of the things we've heard, Chris heard that it could, that it's trending towards that position reporting directly to Michael Alford, the athletic director, instead of FSU's current setup where FSU's GM Derek Ray reports to Mike Norvell directly. And we have heard that FSU's been in contact with a couple potential candidates for the position, including Martin Mayhew, who was with the Washington Commanders. Most recently, he's retired in the last year, I believe. And then Brian Zanders, who is with the Jags in a front office, highly elevated front office position. And he has a good amount of experience around the NFL. Those are the kind of the 2 main names we've heard. And as far as when these changes could happen, I heard yesterday from a source that the idea is that potentially after signing day on Wednesday is when we could start seeing some people in the building being let go. It's kind of the timeline for what we saw FSU do last year. They obviously made some changes to the coordinators, right after, I believe it was the UF game last year. And then, some of the position coaches were let go after signing day, like Randy Shannon, I believe, was let go at that point. So I could see more changes happening after Wednesday.
One thing I've arrived at in thinking about the GM situation, the front office, and to me, some of that's just I can't need to take the focus off of the fact that the head coach is a failure and that they should have fired him. But the thing I've arrived at is in the process of the decision making from Stanford until the statement prior to UF, why were they not in the process of realigning the front office, redoing that, working towards a hire, trying to get that done? Because I view it as if they can't make that hire before January, then, and obviously they're not going to make the hire before the signing class is signed on Wednesday. So it has no fingerprints on that group. And that group will be roughly 27, 28 of your 50 new incomers. So the only potential fingerprints is on the portal portion. And if they don't get here early enough, they don't have any say in retention versus pushing guys out with your current roster. And then there's a concern of how much are they going to be able to hit the ground running when the portal is in operation January 2nd to the 16th, which are the official dates, but the portal is going to pick up plenty of steam in December prior to it actually being a real thing at a D1 level. So I don't.
There's already players entering or announcing intent, like good players announcing intent to enter. These stuff gets done way ahead of time. Sorry, I think it's just important to note here.
I don't know. I don't believe that's going to have a great deal of fingerprints on 2026, which is disappointing because it essentially creates a transition year without an actual real transition of the top of the castle, the king of the castle, in Mike Norvell. So it's just something I've thought about, like, and the fact that the statements didn't provide the outcome that I think it should have, which was firing the head coach. It disappoints me that there wasn't the effort motive to get something done, that if you were going to stick with that head coach and ride it out with that head coach, to put yourself in a better position to assemble a better roster, because the results of the last 2 seasons tell you that you have failed miserably at assembling rosters. You have 7 wins in your last 24 games, 25 actually, including the Orange Bowl, which speaks to the departure of certain portions of your roster and what you had to lean on. Not that they were ever going to win that game, but we know what the final of that game was and how it was played. To me, like, that's one of those things, like, if we're going to be aggressive and try to in any way fix this, which I take most of the things that are said as simply trying to appease people and kick the can down the road instead of we're actually really trying to fix this thing. But I wish that had happened. It irritates me that we've basically squandered 35 to 40 days with no real action, and it's still probably going to take some time, especially if you're waiting for a guy who's at the NFL level who is currently in an NFL job, and you're not, got to be able to hire him till potentially the conclusion of essentially the NFL regular season.
Zach, I want to get to you real quick, but just a few things from our reporting to just add to it for further context. The January timeline is what we've heard from multiple sources is what FSU thinks is reasonable for. I think this is where we need to get a little bit more detail on, but to make the front office hire, whatever the title is, whether it's GM, whether it's president of football, whatever it is, that all-encompassing hire, is that to get just that person in place or to get their entire staff in place? I think that is a dynamic at work. And just again, to reiterate the timelines, you're going to have signing day for the prep class coming up in 2 days, early signing period. So this current regime that you're basically saying isn't up to snuff at Florida State standards, it has their fingerprints all over this class. I mean, entirely on it. And it's going to be the largest prep class in Mike Norvell's history. So you're taking in the highest volume of players ever with a transition staff, basically. So you tell me whether that makes sense or not. And then to the January transfer portal, I think it's the first week of January. It's the only transfer portal window. And so it's really the only opportunity to
There's no longer a spring window.
Correct. And so, that's another thing that you're behind the 8 ball on. I do think, so I'll get into my thoughts on it, Zach, but I just wanted to provide those to really, for our listeners, hammer home those points.
Yeah. I mean, quickly, just to give my thoughts on this, because I think it's I feel like I've been gaslit by some kind of defending this administration in a sense of, like, we know that their real search for a GM started after their statement they released for retaining him after retaining Mike after NC State.
Yeah. I think they've done some.
Well, here's the important.
They arrived at the idea of doing this prior to the statement. I think it's fair. We all knew,
but they didn't actually
reporting by us on the website and on the podcast that they intended to hire a GM prior to the actual statement coming out. But yes, you're right. The actual, like, vetting of individuals, the taking phone calls, making phone calls portion seemingly
they're in the process of figuring out what consulting firms to use.
Yes.
And so you're in the infant stage.
They're at right now with what they're doing. Correct.
You're in the infancy of this process.
But here's a good comparison. Florida just hired their new head football coach, right? John Summerall. The same day, they also hired a GM that they had been vetting throughout the season, multiple candidates. So there's it's all performative to me. It doesn't feel like they think that this is something that is actually going to change the football program, because if they did, then they would have been ahead of this for weeks, because they issued through their actions that no matter how Mike Norvell finished this season, he was going to stay on the, in his position. I mean, you just got absolutely demolished by your rival. And they're running it back. Everything's fine. And my point is, like, people, blindly defend this administration. No, they had a plan. They did all this stuff before, so that means that they have a plan now. They don't have a plan. Like, I don't believe that they had this plan for how they were going to operate once announcing that Norvell was coming back. I mean, we're still talking about them, contacting consulting firms on how to manage this hiring process. Like, they're not down the line about to make a hire, which is where they should be. They were serious about wanting this new phase of the program actually having any sort of impact on next year's roster, which we have outlined. Like, they're not going to have any impact on the fourth of the roster that you're about to bring in the high school ranks, and then another fourth that you might bring in through the transfer portal in January. Like,
not to mention retention and pushing guys out in the negotiation season that happens with your roster.
Like, you're like, let's say you don't make a hire until mid-January, right? Which would be after the portal window or right as it's closing up. Who is doing these negotiations for your current roster and trying to retain some of these important pieces? I dropped an article today of the guys that I think you need to prioritize retaining this offseason, and there's like 10 that would be tough losses. And like, if you're the agent of these players, like, what do you like? What's the decision here? You don't know. Like, I mean, there's so much uncertainty. Like, the person you're negotiating with is potentially not going to be like on staff in a month or something. Like, I just, it all strikes me as they were unprepared. We know that their process truly started after they released the statement following the NC State loss, when this all should have started, latest after the Stanford game, because that's when, this came to a boiling point of you deciding whether you needed to move on or not.
This all should have started this past offseason.
Oh, yeah, when we clearly outlined what we thought should have happened, and they made one.
I hate we're at the place where
Zach's point is they should have realized the problem after Stanford. Stanford was a flashbang warning sign abundantly right in your face on the heels of Pitt, which was an important outing.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand. If Pitt was being described by people behind the scenes as like a must win, and how many other losses did you have after that? I feel like we're living in this crazy world right now. But
I just don't know if people are blindly defending the administration.
Like Mr. Ricard?
Yes, Mr. Ricard. And
he's not living in reality. People aren't living in realities. It's what's happened. And I don't think, the amount of people blindly supporting administration, there's a lot of questions about the administration currently, and a lot of stuff out there. Some of it I believe true. Some of it I think is wishy-washy information that I don't believe is true, but I don't think that they're getting a pass on this generally. Now, they still are empowered to make these moves and to go about the plan or lack of plan unencumbered. Like, there's not any consequences for it at this time, other than reputation taking a hit, right? Like, other than us talking about how it doesn't make sense on a podcast or fans tweeting at them over and over again. Like, that's really, Peter Collins must be really happy he doesn't have Twitter. You can't tag him when everyone else is getting tagged, when McCullough and Alfred are. But like, the stuff with the front office, in addition to the timeline you laid out, Zach, of it not making a lot of sense post Stanford, is, as of right now, January is the timeline. I think they're gonna have to speed that up for making a hire. I think they're gonna, not just logically, not only should you, I think they're gonna be pressured into it as they start realizing, oh, this doesn't make sense. Because as of right now, the person who you're saying, why are you smiling?
I just think it's so funny that we're talking about these people in such high-ranking positions in at a huge university, just now realizing that, oh, maybe hiring the front office people that won't have any sort of say, in mid-January, and won't have any say on the roster next year is kind of an issue.
So I think last year, we've tap danced around it, tiptoed around it. I think last year Derek Gray should have been stripped of GM duty. Should not have been the amount of power that he had, because that roster was a 2-win roster. Now, should they have won more than 2 games? Yes. But ultimately, the person whose fingerprints were on the negotiations of that, of making portal decisions, of really pushing for DJ Uiagalelei, like, there had to be a consequence for something that's not acceptable at Florida State. And your changes were to bring in the Tony White staff. We saw that their inability to bring Nebraska players over with them did not fit into the criteria of overhauling the defensive personnel.
It wasn't like we had set up that expectation. They told people as soon as they got into the building that they were bringing in like 4 or 5 players with them.
And then Gus Malzahn basically doesn't have his fingerprints at all on recruiting, maybe other than occasionally quarterback, which.
Yeah. I wonder, I don't know if he negotiated that or something, but I mean, he essentially like just.
I mean, how many times did he go on the road?
Not many. I heard he was like barely in the office in like April and May.
And so I don't know if it was before spring, but Zach asked Mike Norvell on record, I think it was a pre-spring press conference about it, about the changes to recruiting and whether enough was done to address it. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Mike said like the changes we made should reflect that already. And that just hasn't been the case. It's not good enough with recruiting. But that's all to say, I think that a year ago was your time to make these changes, to reevaluate how you're doing the front office stuff. And you did none of it. You brought in Devin
Rispress.
Nailed it. Crushed it. Cut that out. Cut it, Brett. But that was your move. Right, that was it from the front office. Like you got rid of people, you promoted from within. You said not only we're running back, we're going to further reinforce what we're doing. And so that's my point. That didn't make sense. But here you are now, a year later, with a better roster, right? With a better roster that
it's a better roster.
With the roster wasted on that roster.
Okay,
for every hit like a Deuce Robinson and a Gavin Sawchuk, you have a Squirrel White and. Yeah,
this should have been on paper a 6 or 7 win team. Not good enough at Florida State.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's 82 teams that are eligible for bowls, I believe it is, and FSU isn't one of them. So, yeah, FSU probably should be one of those 82.
Yes. Which, by the way, a quick aside, the narrative, the people blindly saying, "Oh, this was improvement from last year," bullshit. Don't say that. It's Florida State. How dare you? Like, how dare you say that is improvement from last year? To say from 2 to 5 is acceptable. And to point to the stats, well, we were top 20 in this. No, you should have won 6 to 7 games. You won 5. So you underachieved. And every advanced metric out there is going to say between 6 and 7 wins is what you should have had. So I don't want to hear about the multiple 1-score loss. No, like this is what your play on the field got you. Was I'm giving you an extra win. Still not good enough. Don't accept that. Don't tolerate it. If you are tolerating it, I'm shaming you right now. That's not okay. It's not an acceptable way for this program to be conducted. Have some pride in yourself, please. Like in this program, please do that. Back to my point on the front office. This should have been done a year ago. You're now doing it now. My biggest concern, guys, that it just does not make sense is if this timeline holds, if they don't make adjustments, if they don't go ahead and remove people in the next week, and make a hire, at least like the top of the food chain hire, to start fleshing out, to try to get it ready and get organized and get on the same page with the head coach leading up to the transfer portal process. If you don't do that, then you're basically saying the coaching staff and the front office that gave you 7 wins over 2 years has full autonomy over the 2026 high school class, and then more importantly, the transfer portal cycle. And then you're going to make Derek Gray fall on the sword and fire him or demote him. But you're also giving him full autonomy to do the transfer portal stuff. How does that make sense? Like, Derek Gray is going to be a scapegoat in all this. And while I don't think he's done a good enough of a job the last 2 years, that the results say as much, I also he did a better job this past year than he did the year before. And now you're saying that's not good enough, but the head coach remains. And other people within the program remain. Like,
It's just a result of them making an unprecedented decision to keep Mike. I mean,
Yeah.
Here's my take on D-Ray is I think that he has not done a good enough job when it comes to obviously assembling these rosters. But also, I think he was not hired to do like even half of what he's responsible for doing now because of how the landscape has changed in college football. I mean, back when he was hired in early 2022, I believe, it was not, the NIL era was not as in depth as it is now. There weren't these super in-depth negotiations happening.
They sent him around to a bunch of football offices and did a bunch of Zoom meetings this past year, so it should have been fixed. He should have had a firm grasp on it then. That was sarcasm. It was sarcasm. Yeah, it was an asinine, and we called that out in real time too. It just didn't make sense.
They needed to build up the front office and improve the operation last offseason. We discussed that. We brought that up. You wrote about it, Simone.
Multiple times.
Like we're repeating ourselves here.
And I don't think we have all the answers. But
it's not. It's not. The way college football teams are constructed has dramatically changed in the last half decade and is rapidly changing in real time, especially in the last 36 months. And FSU has not evolved well with that. And that was a plain and simple truth 12 months or 11 months ago. And it's the truth right now. And you need people in there that know what it looks like, who know how to spend money financially responsibly to construct a roster that gives you the best chance of winning as many games as possible, that puts you in a position to absorb hits, injuries, depth issues, and misses. And FSU simply doesn't do that. FSU hangs their hat on certain big pieces that they expect to be major contributors, guys that help them immensely in a season, and they turn out to be Jason Jenkins.
That's a tough one. We can go through and probably in the coming days, we'll go through what worked and what didn't work this season. And your trench transfer evals, more or less, were all busts. DeAndre McRae was clearly the best one and probably the least expensive acquisition.
Yeah. And he can't rush the passer.
Yeah, he's a one-trick guy, which is fine. It's not his fault. Like he was.
Yeah, it's not the fault of the players. Like that they were misevaluated to play at this level.
And so the full picture to Chris's initial point is the circumstances that Florida State administration has set up for you is, as of right now, and unless this changes, the moves that they are making are going to have little to no impact on the 2026 roster, which is going to have to replace its entire offensive line, probably its quarterback. We'll get into this shortly. We've asked coaches, both the coordinators and the head coach, whether the coordinators are coming back. We can't get a clear answer on that, which is certainly interesting. You think if it was a simple yes, that it would be of course. We haven't gotten that. So potentially new schemes. You have basically said, I don't want to say punt, but you are admitting that you're not putting yourself in an optimal position to compete in 2026. And again, if you're fine accepting that, I'm not, and I have less skin in the game than many, many people listen to this podcast from an emotional standpoint, and it bothers the hell out of me. So I hope it bothers the hell out of a lot of people because it's not okay.
And this just goes back to in the case that let's say they fire one or two of the coordinators. I don't think that would happen. I think they would probably just leave on their own. But I think they'll probably let go of at least, one assistant coach. It goes back to the question, how much money are you actually saving?
And who are you hiring too? Like, who's signing up for this?
Yeah.
And Chris has brought this up in the past. You have to do multi-year guaranteed deals. So you're throwing money at bad situations, money.
So I know something that is being talked about when it comes to the GM hunt. Like I've heard that Xanders, specifically Brian Xanders, has reached out to some in the profession, just asking about, the landscape in general, getting an understanding of what would be required of him, but also like asking, like, should I take this job? Like, what does this look like? And, I think some people have told him, like, cautioned him about it, from what I've heard, because of the job security. Who knows? Maybe Mike Norvell's job security is just 100%, intact for years to come.
Well, to your point, Zach, on that, you hire an individual like that with a contract that is not attached to the head coach's contract and the current construction of the program.
Yeah, I think that's what's being pitched to him.
Now, the concern there is, say, it is more attached to the AD, for example. If the AD were to leave, then he has to deal with a new boss, and that's where he, in this case, Brian Sanders in the example, would be concerned about it. All job taking comes with risk, but you can disconnect the GM hire from the head coach and what's going on with him and his staff and the potential of very hot seat, and give them a longer rope, essentially, by connecting them more directly to the university or athletics separately of that individual. But again, that's multi-year, that's finances committed, that's also promises being made on each end of the rope, and people hoping that the same people are holding each end of the rope down the road.
And then I would point to, and I think that's hiring a GM to at least reinvest in your program separate of the head coach is one of the better paths you can go down currently with the choices you've made. I think the way you're going down that path has me questioning the process, but that we just talked about that. Let's say a year from now, you make your GM hire. Again, right now we're operating on an assumption that they don't make there's not a whole lot of fingerprinting on the 2026 roster. It's a 5 to 7 win season, and you move on from Mike Norvell. You say, okay, we got our finances, we got our ducks in a row. Well, so then the head coach would have to be in lockstep with that GM, right? Like your talent pool would be, I shouldn't say limited.
Or the GM is a roadblock to hiring a head coach because the head coach you want to hire doesn't want to have
That's
that.
what I'm saying. Like
GM,
yes.
yes.
You're potentially restricting. Potentially, it may not matter. And if you make a good enough of a hire, it may not matter. But that is a consideration, and that is a pro and con that we're weighing with this path you're going down. With obviously the best case scenarios, Mike Norvell figures it out, regains his magic pre-snub, and that's the best case scenario. I don't think we're operating in the timeline where that's likely to happen right now, obviously. And then we're putting a lot of trust in administration, not just the hiring process, but how are they evaluating salary cap? We've talked about that a lot too, and thinking there's a level of naivete that the athletic director, Michael Alford, was operating with, and how he publicly talked about it over and over again at Board of Trustees meetings, on record when asked about it, in multiple settings, all throughout the offseason, of saying that it's going to be enforced. And we still have to see what happens, because the salary cap this year was set in place, but so many teams front-loaded, and that includes Florida State, front-loaded their salary to where I think they went over whatever the number, 18 million that they had allocated for football. I think they went over it. How much over? We've heard mixed things. It might be $1 million over to about $19 million roster. It might be a $24 million roster. I don't think it is $24 million. I think that's on the high side. Go ahead, Chris.
I was matter-of-factly told this week, because of certain people's comments elsewhere, this was told to me. 88% of the rev share, which is a consistent figure we have been told goes to football, which is one of the higher percentage rev shares that goes to football, as I understand it.
Potentially the most in powerful.
And part of the reason I know that figure is true is because I know what other sports are dealing with at FSU with regards to their rev share, and it's because it's limited because 88% is going to football. So 88% of it, someone can do the math. I don't have the time to waste on that. But then on top of that was NIL essentially infused it with the front loading, which landed them around, I was told 20. We have said 25 million in the past. I was told it was more like 24 and a half, but 25 was a number that we could live with. So 24 to 25 million.
It's interesting. So we've heard that as the high side. We've heard we've heard 19 as the low. Hang on, I do have a point on it. 19 on the low side. It is very interesting to me, depending on the point of view of that, because that is a pretty wide gulf that we've heard. And then we start getting to wonder is like, what's the incentive for different people to put out that number, right? If it's on the high side, what are you trying to project, I guess? Or on the low side, what are you trying to project?
When people are sharing that number, I'm sharing 24.5 million as the total financial figure put into it.
Into the football.
I do wonder when people share the lower figure if they're talking about things that are taken out that were included in FSU's deals, how FSU did their work, which we have talked about in the past on this podcast. That's what I come to. But 24.5 million is the number I was matter-of-factly told. 88% of the rev share plus the number on top.
regardless, I don't think it was a $10 million dollar roster. If that was the number that was floating around, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and is not correct. But like, we do need to like vet. Okay, so what does admin? Are they willing to then find ways to? Is it Learfield Legends? They have Legends, right?
I
Is
believe
that
that's
their
what
marketing? Are they able to redistribute? Is that a thing that's financially viable? And can you start planning to go above the salary cap? I know I talked to one group of 6 GM who was at a program that would have been considered for Power 4 jobs, and maybe a program that has elevated a coach to a Power 4 job. That there were concerns about Florida State's view on salary cap. Like, that is a thing that was in the coaching industry. That's not just us talking about it. So that was something that they will have to figure out, whether it's for this coaching staff, because the only time that Mike Norvell, outside of the 2022 season, has had a good season, 2023 being the best, was when you were in like the 95th to 99th percentile for roster. So if you can buy a badass roster, he can win a lot of games potentially. But you need to have an elite roster saddled with it right now. It's what the results would say.
In the roster financial discussion, I think the thing that's always disregarded, because people get obsessed with the overall figure, and the overall figure obviously matters. Bigger piggy banks usually help you win. The allocation of funds has been done horrendously by FSU over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and listen, that I can. Some of that is Derek Ray, but like, that's Mike Norvell. He signs off on all of that. How much money is being spent? How much money has been spent on Lucas Simmons or Jonathan Daniels or Manasseh Atiti? Like, how much money have you spent on these players to mold and then not mold them? That has to be about $1 million investment between just offensive linemen who don't play snaps over the last couple of years. It's not insignificant, right? And like, you got to pay to play. You have to pay to develop them. But if you can't develop them, man, you're missing on the evals. Like, this is why the larger picture we've been pushing for, like, the evaluation system has to be ramped up. And so, like, I do think it's important to be like, they have been willing to spend. Have they been willing to be consistently aggressive in the model the last year or two? And when I say aggressive, I mean in the 99th percentile. We've heard conflicting things. I don't think so. I don't think this is a 99th percentile roster from a budgetary standpoint. And I think they've been wishing that it doesn't have to get there.
I think it's a top 20 to 25 level budget for a roster. I do not, maybe even top 15, might be in that 15 to 20 range is where I'd probably land. But it's tough because figures aren't published, they're not publicly available, and there's plenty of hyperbole and inflation that goes on in the discussion.
We've heard about a $5 million discrepancy, which is a pretty big percentage wise from people within the program. Like, we've heard different things, like, and that's coming from people within the program. That's not, what national reporters who are talking to agents are saying, or what schools say, Miami's spending $30 million. Miami's like, we're not spending $30 million. And Miami says, this school's spending $50 million.
Another fine example. And we know Texas Tech spends.
Zach, you got to go. Go get your haircut, buddy. Bye.
We know Texas Tech spends, but that is what it is. And they have the money to do it. The FSU's issue is that they've done a miserable job with what's been provided to them of producing a product that should be at least semi-competitive on a regular basis in the ACC, and it simply has not been. And that's like the starting point. The end point is what you're truly aspiring to, which is bigger and greater things. But before you can run, you got to walk, and FSU can't walk. I'm
problematic.
The front office situation has been a thing for it was a major role player in 2024, being the miserable experience that it was, and it was allowed to operate in a relatively similar manner without major overturn and decisions made to do it in a more efficient manner and a more professional manner. And it's why 2025's roster was unable to basically flip their actual results, because it just wasn't built in a manner where it could. It was too dependent on too many pieces that they deemed as being something more than they actually were.
Well said. One other thing I want to get to before we turn the page from the front office conversation is, I do at least want to address it. I'll say what I'll say on it, and then we'll move forward. Because there are things that, like what I know, what I don't know, I want to be transparent. But like, there's been stuff recently, people asking what from the rev share numbers, like what was baked into it in terms of projected salary. And some are saying scholarships, some are saying stipends. Like what we reported back in July. And let's see, I'm finding the exact wording. This is back on the Noles 24/7 message board and a post that I made talking about all the different issues they were having at the time with negotiations. But didn't go into a ton of detail, but did mention that university stipends were factored into some of the initial terms that were presented to players. Those stipends, as far as I understood it, Chris, were things like cost of living, how much money you're able to allocate towards food and stuff, and basically would have been like $2 million total, not per player, but for the entire roster that Florida State thought it would be saving by kind of sweeping that into it. But depending on like who the player was, like that could have been 10 to 20% of their salary that year, if not more, which is significant. And players and representatives, again, back in July, not in November, not in September, in July, we're finding out about that. And that was a source of contention, among many sources of contention in the front office, the negotiations between front office, athletic department, university. It was messy. Again, that's documented, that was reported. Different sides had their different point of views of what was going on, and the pushing for either to save money, to get more money for your clients, whatever. Everyone had their own point of view on it, but that was a thing. I don't know that scholarship was included in that figure. I don't think it was, because that would be a lot more money. So I don't know that for a fact one way or the other. I know that's been discussed out there. I don't know, and that's just something I will say transparently. I don't know, but yeah, that was the thing that was discussed. I know that the front office was part of that. I believe the athletic department was as well, with the stipend part of funds. And again, stipend being things like cost of living for players. But yeah, I don't know that was a huge financial part of it, but it was a part of the negotiations that did rub some agents the wrong way. That's all I got on that. Good? Okay. Moving on. Coaching changes real quick. Like, we've asked, right? We've dug on it. Chris was able to come in some information. I was able to confirm it. We do believe Gus Malzahn has interviewed for multiple coaching jobs, or at least had conversations about it. Arkansas one, UAB another. Confirmed. I don't think he's getting either of those. Obviously, he's not getting Arkansas because it's filled. And
UAB looks like they may go with a former assistant who I believe is at SMU. I think that's at least where they're leaning at the moment. But that job has, UAB's had trouble filling that job. It's not a particularly good situation. Why would he go to UAB? I believe there's some family ties. He's also familiar with some of the decision makers from his time at Auburn.
I do wonder, like ULM with was it SJ Tui or whatever, or is it AJ Tui? But it's a kid from the. I'm sorry, he's not a kid anymore. There's a guy who's from the Blind Side. Was the kid in the Blind Side? Had been running UCF's collective for a couple years, so that would be the tie to Gus Malzahn. Obviously, would have a tie to Hugh Freeze from the Blind Side days. So ULM's another one, but I heard from someone who speaks with agents that there may not be a change there, and they have financial issues, so restrictive. But anyways, the point being is that we've heard from multiple people that Gus has talked and has at least expressed interest in hearing about head coaching stuff. A year after getting out of the head coaching game because he wasn't enjoying it, by his words. So it does lead me to believe is he in it for the long haul or not? Is he just looking for a head coaching job maybe, and then he's fine with staying at Florida State as the offensive coordinator? I don't know. I don't get the feeling that this worked particularly well for the parties involved. I don't think it was a great situation, but we will see. We've asked about Tony White. We've asked Tony White. I don't know what his options would be right now. I don't think that worked particularly well either. I think he would probably have to make changes, Chris, to his staff.
Yeah, I think Terrence Knight and Evan Cooper are two guys that haven't exactly won people over with their performances in year one at Florida State. Substitution issue in the Florida game was relevant to substitution issue in the Pitt game, both involving the defensive line, both drew the ire of the head coach. There's examples like that. No member of the coaching staff should feel comfortable with the results that's on the field. I know FSU's kind of allowed it to go on, but we did see changes with regards to the coaching staff last year. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. That all being said, I don't know of them preparing to fire anybody imminently at this very moment. Now, would they motivate people to go find other jobs while looking for other people? Yeah, I think some of that's certainly happening.
So it sets the stage for will be an interesting couple weeks or so, month of the offseason here. There's a lot of big moves that have to be made. Will any of them matter? I take a deep sigh and say probably not, but we haven't covered a game that's mattered in 3 years here, apparently, for results. And just keep on plugging along, Chris. How's that for being a little downtrodden on a Monday morning?
I'm fine with it all. We're at the off season. It's time to cover the off season.
All right, so stick along if you are interested in what's happening. Noles 24/7 has you covered. We will work hard. We will work diligently to figure out what's happening. We'll try to contextualize it. We'll work our best to be responsible professional journalists in terms of the news we report, how we report it. We're gonna try our best here. It's gonna be silly season as well. So, anyways, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for watching. Signing days on Wednesday. We'll have you covered there at Noles 24/7 as well. We'll see. Maybe there'll be a few surprises. I don't know. Sticking the landing.